this evening, in fact, it's part of Palestine in my heart. It will be a serious, long-term, we will see how much time it will take. It's an action. It started in Mytilene, and we launched on Monday a call for artists, because this event is part as well of Créations en urgence. We support artists in forced displacement, and the idea is to do actions, to collect money, and to support. We will send money to artists and photojournalists in Gaza specifically and in Palestine. So you can follow us via Créations en urgence website or Instagram if you are interested to see the next events in Marseille and other places where we will be.
To stand with Palestine, with Palestinian people. All our thought goes as well to all people living all over the globe, that they are facing injustice, political, critical crisis, and of course climate catastrophes. As nowadays we have a lot of stuff happening, genocides everywhere, wars, everything. So I'm gonna start to introduce the speakers of the panel. We have third person, but he's not with us, unfortunately. So Mo is a worker from Gaza. I met him at Paria a few days ago, and we recorded his voice yesterday. Mo arrived before around 12 days to Mytilene. He's from Gaza. Hibai Arbide Aza is a journalist from El Pais. He reports on various subjects with a focus on the refugee crisis in Greece, Balkan, Middle East, and North Africa. He is actively covering the ongoing Gaza conflict. Professor Nikos Xipolitas is an assistant professor at the University of Aegean.
That's it. Let's give it like that.
Okay. Where he teaches sociology of migration. He teaches as well as Pantheon University and at University of Cyprus. Okay. Plus abroad. Okay, good. So the movie gives us an idea of daily life in Gaza. And I wanted to start, in fact, this talk with Mo by knowing what does it mean, a daily, normal life in Gaza. So I asked Mo, and he answered. I recorded. We're gonna hear his voice, and Omar will do the translation.
باختصار يعني الحياة ما بعرف أنا من وين حابدأ لك، بس يعني خلينا نبدأ من ناحية الاقتصاد أو الوضع بالنسبة للعمال. يعني تقريبا يومية العامل من 10 ل 15 شيكل، يعني تقريبا ما يقارب $3 أو $3.50. فيعني هدول ما بعيشوا عيلة، يعني الحد الأدنى لا العيلة اللي حتعيش فيها يعني ما بوصلهم للمستوى اللي هو مطلوب. فهذه شغلة. بالنسبة للمية برضه مياه الشرب فيها مشكلة، يعني بصعوبة لما بنحصلها. وكذلك مية الغسيل والمية المالحة بتاعت البيوت. بالنسبة للكهرباء برضو، يعني الكهرباء بتيجي 8 ساعات، تقطع 12، تقطع 10، يعني مش دائما نص.
Okay, can we stop it there? So the situation in Gaza in brief and in life in general. I don't know from where to start. Let's start from the economical side, or the situation of the workers. Approximately, the daily income is between 10 to 15 shekels, which is approximately $3.5. So this amount, unfortunately, does not feed a family. and in general, not enough to cover normal family standards. So that one point. In concern about the water, the drinking water is problematic. I mean, it's very, very difficult for us to even get a hold of it. And so goes for the water for washing and showering. It's a salty water that we have in the houses. And concerned to the electricity, we have it for 8 hours and then it gets cut for 10 hours, sometimes 12, not always.
بالنسبة للوضع المعيشي يعني بشكل عام صعب جدا. قبل 7 أكتوبر الوضع صعب، فما بالك بعد 7 أكتوبر، يعني بعد الأحداث اللي صارت وبعد 7 أكتوبر كل يعني الشغلات اللي كانت معدومة من الأساس يعني بطلت موجودة، يعني مش موجودة. كان مية، كان كهرباء، الكهرباء ما بيجي ولا ساعة. بالنسبة لمياه الشرب برضو انعدمت، لا في بترول ولا في ديزل نشغل المحطات، فيعني حياة معدومة.
Okay. And in concern for the quality of life in general, it's very, very difficult. Before 7th of October, the situation was very difficult. So imagine after that how the situation would be. After 7th of October, things that were even difficult to find didn't even exist anymore. The electricity doesn't come on whatsoever. There is no water, no fuel of any sort to function generators or pump. Life has been executed.
وقت تقول انت الشغل العمل وين كنتوا شو قصدك وين كان الشغل بغزة؟
And the question was, and when you talk about work, do you mean in Gaza or outside of Gaza?
برا غزة.
لا، الشغل في غزة طبعا، احنا ما بنقدر نطلع برا غزة يعني بصعوبة جدا. يعني انت لما بدك تطلع برا غزة بدك تسجل في الداخلية لما بعد 2 أو 3 أو 4 لما يطلع يجي اسمك تقدر تطلع. بالنسبة للشغل داخل غزة اللي هو الشغل في الخضرة، شغل في المواد البناء، يعني في كل شيء. يعني أكثر يومية عامل أنا حكيت لك قبل هيك 15 من 10 ل 15 شيء. يعني الواحد بيطلع من 7 الصبح بروح 7 المساء أو 8 المساء على 10 أو 15 شيء. يعني ال 15 شيء ما بيجيبوا ربطان خبز.
ومين كان
So the reply back was, no, the work in Gaza, of course. We can't go out of Gaza, it's very difficult. We can't go, it's very difficult. If we want to go outside of Gaza, we need authorization to go out, and that takes 3 to 4 months to get it. And concerning the work inside Gaza, for example, for a farmer or constructor and agriculture, the maximum income, as I said before, would be 10 to 15 shekels for 12 hours of work. I mean, 15 shekels isn't even enough to buy 2 bags of bread.
وقت تقول انت الخضره يما هيك اللي هن الفلسطينيه كانوا بيشغلوا بعضهم يما غير فلسطينيين.
صحيح.
And who do you mean when you say farmers and constructors? Do you mean the Palestinians were employing each other, or somebody else was employing the Palestinians?
الفلسطينية نفسهم يعني اللي عنده مثلا 10 دلوم أرض أو متأجر له 20 دلم أرض بزرعهم بطاطا بندورة يعني هيك، وبجيب عمال. يعني طبعا من وين حيجيب من عمال فلسطينيين. فهيك يعني شغل الخضرة، شغل مال البناء والعمار. انت عارف غزة يعني تقريبا 15 سنة حصار، كل شيء فيها صعب او كل شيء فيها واقف.
يعني انتم
The work is employed by the Palestinians themselves, and as for the construction work, as you know, it's really difficult. Gaza is under a blockade for the past 15 years. Everything in it is difficult, or everything in it is blocked. And the next question is, so you were taking a shower using the seawater?
تحمم بمية البحر.
المية اللي كانت تجيني يعني مية البحر أحلى منها. المية اللي بتيجي على البيوت بتتحمم فيها، مية البحر أحلى منها.
So the water we were using was even worse than the seawater. The seawater is even better compared to the water we used to shower.
شرب.
مية الشرب طبعا نشتريها شرية. يعني بالنسبة ومش دائما متوفرة حتى. يعني مش دائما متوفرة. يعني عندك النص كوب أو 500 لتر مية يعني كنا نشتريهم ب20-30 شيء. يعني بدك شغل يومين أو 3 لما تجيبي لك حق برميل، نص برميل مية.
And what about the drinking water? The drinking water, we always buy it, and most of the times it's not even accessible. You need to work for 2 or 3 days to be able to buy a gallon of water, so the situation is really difficult. And the medical situation?
الوضع صعب يعني صراحة الوضع.
والطب؟
الوضع الطبي ما هو أكيد يعني بالنسبة لوضع الطب كارثي، لا في علاج، لا في ما فيش ولا حاجة. حتى قبل 7 أكتوبر لا في أدوية ولا في شيء، ما في ولا شيء. حتى المريض اللي بده يروح يتعالج في المستشفى يعني حتى العلاج أو حتى أبسط يعني إبرة المسكن أو الشاش اللي كانوا يلزموها في المستشفى يخلوا المرضى يروح يشتري شرية لأنه ما في.
So the question was, and the medical situation? The medical situation is catastrophical. There is no medication. Hospitals weren't equipped and insufficient to meet patients' needs. Patient had to even buy medical supplies to just be treated in the hospitals.
وهلا بالاحداث كان في شفت كان في مقال محطوط انحبس 5000 غزاوي كانوا عم يشتغلوا برات غزه. وهيدول وين بيشتغلوا يعني مع الدولة يعني بتخيل وقفتهم؟
هدول كانوا 17,000 عامل بيشتغلوا في الداخل المحتل. يعني كانوا بيشتغلوا يعني كان لهم تصريح عمال زي ما تصريح عمل كل 6 شهور بتجدد. فلما صارت أحداث 7 أكتوبر طبعا اللي قدر يهرب على الضفة هرب، واللي ما قدر انحبس وتبهدل واتاخذوا فلوسه وانضرب وتبهدل وتهانوا يعني. وفي منهم شيء رجعوهم على غزة وشيء لسه محجوز يعني ما رجعوهم.
The question was, I read an article that says 5,000 employees from Gaza were arrested in Israel. Can you tell me more about this? And he said 17,000 workers were working in the occupation land. They had work permits that were entitled to a renewal every 6 months. On October 7th, those who were able to escape from their work, they escaped and to the West Bank, and those who didn't were arrested, humiliated, tortured, and were robbed of their money. Thousands were released and the rest are still arrested.
بالداخل وقت يشتغلوا بيكونوا بيشتغلوا مع دولة مع الإسرائيل بس بيكونوا بيشتغلوا مع الدولة يا ما بيكونوا بيشتغلوا خاص؟
لا خاص ما في
خاص مش مع الدولة. اوكي. وهن بيقبضوا أكثر من اللي بغزة يا ما
يوم يعني يومية العامل تقدر تقول من 70 ل 90 دولار أو يعني من 70 ل 100 دولار يعني هو العامل الصناعي.
اوكي. بغزة
Does workers have they been working with the government or private sector, with the Israeli government or private sector? And he answered, no private sector. They've worked with the private sector. And the next question was, are they paid more or the same as the others or more or the same as the other workers of Gaza? And he replied, they make daily $70 to $90. The next question was, is this difference because Gaza was under a blockade?
معيشة كانت يعني الناس يقبضوا قليل لأنه ما معهم أصلا مصاري.
ما معهم مصاري أصلا.
بقى كله أكيد الوضع بيكون
بالضبط صحيح. كل ما فيش فلوس أصلا يعني أنت كيف بدك تشتري؟ فطبعا دولة معدومة ما فيها فلوس. طبعا حيكون الاقتصاد معدوم، كل شيء حيكون معدوم. فالوضع صعب يعني قد ما نتصور صعب.
Yes, of course, because there is no money, how can they work and live? Even the government doesn't have any money. Everything has been executed, so there was a huge economical crisis. The situation was beyond imagination and very difficult.
Maybe Hibai, if as you are a journalist, maybe it's good to talk about those reading news, fake news, or things are happening since before and 7 October.
Yeah, I'm going to Egypt and trying to be in the border of Gaza in a few days. So it's a paradox, but maybe I would have more interesting things to explain next week rather than today. But I will try anyway. Already it's a cliche, but we know that the war is also a battle for the narrative, for the framing and for the interpretation of the facts. And nobody in the world in a war spends more money, nobody invests more money in order to guarantee that the narrative is followed than Israel. You can see in all the big media, but you can also feel in social media every time that you post anything related to this war. There are literally hundreds of bots or paid or unpaid volunteers of Israel replying, and they always play in many different levels. There are some of them that they play the role of trying to politely tell you that you have no clue. There are others that they insult you. There are others that directly they threaten you. But the goal is not never make you agree with them. The goal is to create so much noise that you will have no will in order to follow with the conversation. And I mean, I'm experiencing it also. Every time that better. And every time that I'm posting, I'm publishing anything related to this war, I have dozens of replays, and I have also this tiredness of sometimes this temptation of not posting more things because it's very boring to blog like dozens of accounts after every post. But this is clearly a strategy by Israel, so that's why I think we have to continue the conversation. But I also understand who decides not to intervene anymore. The thing is that this also happens with, in a larger scale with media. Every time that a big media publishes something that is not positive to the narrative of Israel, there are phone calls, there are invitations from the embassies, there are press conferences organized by, like for example last Monday there was a press conference in Athens organized by the Israeli embassy for journalists with family members of some of the hostages that are held by Hamas in Gaza. Of course, there were not any family member of any hostage, because as you know, now in Tel Aviv and other cities of Israel, there are a lot of, also Netanyahu is facing the criticism and even the public protest from the family members of the hostages, but this was completely hidden in that press conference, and the family members who took place and who intervened there, they made an absolute defense of not only of Netanyahu and not only of the military and the war, but also about the government. It was purely propaganda using the emotional situation of the family members of the people that is held in probably in terrible situations in Gaza. This strategy follows also with. I have also experienced in first person when you publish something about this conflict. There are always a lot of caution, a lot of maybe this expression we will not use it because, and it's also because the huge pressure of on every media. It doesn't matter how big it is. The biggest media in the world, like BBC, like New York Times, that they are also under this pressure, and they act according to this pressure because they don't want to have problems every time that they publish something. But there is another strategy that is less obvious that I think is even more dangerous, and I would call it the Bucha strategy because it's the same strategy that Russia used 1 year ago for. After it was discovered the massacre of Bucha, this small town in the outskirts of Kiev. This strategy consists on the following. It is not anymore a misinformation campaign in order to convince you that the other narrative is right. They don't care anymore. They know you want a certain amount of people, they won't believe their narrative. So what they do is to publish at the same time so many different versions about the same fact in order to create confusion and in order to lead you to the conclusion that it is impossible to know the truth, and there are so many different versions, so many people saying so many different things, so maybe we will never know what happened. This was super clear, for example, in the Baptist hospital bombing in 17 October. Just minutes before the bombing, one of the unofficial spokesperson in social media of Netanyahu published that this was a successful operation and that the bombing of the hospital was completely legit because that was terrorist based. Then he deleted the post, and so many different accounts started saying that probably this was not a missile coming from Israel, that it was a Palestinian rocket that was malfunctioning and by chance ended up in the hospital. At the same time, just hours after this, the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, published a fake, like clearly fake phone call between two Hamas members saying that they knew that the rocket was from the Islamic Jihad. a spokesperson of the military at the same time said that there were not evidences of bombing because there was not a crater according to the pictures. So, and many other versions that they were not even sufficiently founded to consider them a version, but there was a huge noise that they, in order to provoke exactly this, the goal is to lead you to this feeling of it is impossible to know who's saying the truth, so maybe they are all lying. And at the same time, of course, killing the local journalists, that they could be the ones who could to carry on a proper investigation about the facts, and blocking the journalists from outside to work in Gaza in order to make it possible a proper research, a proper investigation on this. And I think this strategy that is a little bit less obvious than pressuring the media is really working, because today, just some hours ago, Israel has after days and days of bombing different hospitals, because now they bomb hospitals without even the necessity of justifying, because there is already a lot of noise and uncertainty, and nobody believes anymore if there is one side or the other who's bombing the hospital. And today, they have published a video where an Israeli official starts the video saying how the hospitals became part of this war. Like, I mean, for me the answer is so obvious. You started bombing hospitals. That's the way the hospitals became part of this war. But they have already spread so many lies about the hospitals that even so-called prestigious media are doubting, or at least they're publishing, the possibility of the hospitals being the headquarters of Hamas, or being military bases, or whatever. Today, when they have entered, finally, the enemy can occupy it without any kind of military resistance. Of course, it makes no sense, but it didn't make sense 1 week ago, neither, because all the witnesses, all the people, local and foreigner, that has been in Al-Shifa hospital knew already that this was a lie. It was a clearly lie. Everyone who covers a war, everyone who has suffered a war, knows how to identify a military base. It's so easy. You don't need to be an expert or at all. A military base is surrounded by armed guns, armed men that they are controlling, that no one can enter to the military base. This was not happening in Al-Shifa. This was not happening in any other hospital in Gaza. This was super clear. There were thousands of witnesses of this. But because of this strategy of, it doesn't matter, because if someone says one thing, the other one would say, it doesn't matter how many times the Israeli lies has been debunked during the last month, because the strategy works anyway. Debunking it is also part of this noise that they want to be created. The worst the worst consequences of this is that words don't matter anymore in this conflict. Anti-Semitism doesn't mean nothing, because it's used in an absolutely wrong way in order to attack people defending human rights. Meanwhile, in marches pro-Israel, like yesterday in the United States, for example, people with a large record of anti-Semitism is participating, is taking part there. So it doesn't mean nothing anymore. Terrorism doesn't mean nothing anymore. Condemning Hamas doesn't mean anything anymore. The words are just one of the words are noise, and it is very difficult to break this narrative. But I think we have to, even knowing this, we have to try. We have to keep repeating that this is not a war against terrorism, this is not a war against Hamas, this is an ethnic cleansing operation that is taking part in front of our eyes. We cannot, I mean, we can be silent, but it won't work, because I think that the most important point would be, and I leave it for the discussion, but I think that in the last 23 years we've been living in the world that was shaped by the so-called war on terror. The war that was shaped after the Afghan and the invasion of Afghanistan, and then the invasion of Iraq, and the repercussion that it had in all over the world. I think we will start, and we already started living in the world that this war in Middle East is shaping. And the previous one was not fair, but it seems that this one it will be even worse. So the question would be, what are we gonna do in order to avoid it?
Because it will be about the situation, how you see the situation later on, as the West is becoming clearly more radical and fascist, and how should we deal with migration as each catastrophe, well, naturally it will increase, the forced displacement people. But before answering, I would like to pass a small video, a part of an interview About Gaza. It was interviewed by Salman Rushdie in 1986.
Has there been any alteration in your ability to publish or to talk about the Palestinian issue?
To some extent, yes, I think it's true, but it's not, yes, because I think the Palestinian issue is the one issue on which, the sort of the left and the right break in America in a way. And the number of people who are publicly willing to talk about it, as you mentioned at the Penn conference, is very small. There are a few groups, a few people. Chomsky is one, for instance. Alexander Coburn is another person. But most people tend to think, well, it's better left to the crazies. So I think it's there are fewer places that are hospitable to one, yes. And the result is that you tend to publish in to a smaller audience. But ironically, you also become tokenized. So whenever there's some incident, as there has been in the last year, having to do with a hijacking or an outrage of one sort, I always get phone calls from the media saying, "Would you come and comment?" and so on and so forth. So that's a very strange thing. You're used always as the kind of representative of terrorism.
Yes, it's an extraordinary thing that you should know so much.
Exactly.
There should be an assumption that you should know so much about.
You're treated like a diplomat of terrorism. There's you're given a place at the table, etc. Yes. Except once when about 9 months ago, I took my young son, who is a very alert boy and very different from his sister, who has suppressed the fact of her, in a certain sense. She's only 12. It's very hard for her to deal with her background, or at least her parents' background, so she doesn't talk about it at all. But my son is very interested in this whole thing, and he's been with me to Jordan when we went to the National Council in 1984. And he's two people. He adopts the accent. He takes on the accent of a Palestinian speaking English, a rather heavy Arabic accent like that. And he calls himself something different. He's Wadia Saeed with a kind of American accent on the one hand, but then he calls me doctor in Arabic, which means doctor. And he treats me with a kind of ironic veneration. And so he came with me once to this television interview where I was to supposedly debate the Israeli ambassador about, I forget what incident it was. It may have been Achille Lauro or something. And then I found the most extraordinary thing, that not only would he not sit in the same room with me, he wanted to be in a different building so as not to be sort of contaminated. And then when the interviewer said to the national audience, Professor Saeed and Ambassador Netanyahu refused to speak to each other. The Israeli ambassador won't speak to him, and I interrupted. I said, no, I'm perfectly willing to speak to him, but he wants it. So the moderator said, well, I stand corrected. And then he said, Mr. Ambassador, why won't you speak to Professor Saeed? He said, because he wants to kill me. And and the moderator, without batting an eyelash, said, oh, really? tell us about it. And then he went on about how Palestinians want to kill the Israelis. And that, I mean, there wasn't any sense in which the whole thing was totally absurd. So in that respect, it's a very odd situation. You're constantly having to make sort of adjustments to these. And you have to become more than one character.
Yes.
By the way, if you really want to make me feel bad, just put me speak after Edward Said. As if there is some sort of continuation happening. Yeah, that's just brilliant. Let's start with the main thing. There was the main narrative that the Israelis had when they occupied Palestine was that there are people with no land for a land with no people. That was the main narrative. And that meant that Jews were people that did not have a land and they could live in a place where there were no people. Now, that as the basic kind of rationale behind this already set the stage. You deny the existence of people. And you don't do that now, you do that when you start the occupation. So that denying of existence is starting already after the end of the Second World War. And by decades and decades of this horrible occupation of this apartheid state, essentially, we have reached a stage of a straightforward kind of necropolitics. Necropolitics is a term we use. It means essentially that there is your entire management of the situation is the management of death. How you manage death, how you manage killing, and this is what is happening right now. So there is a huge problem. Talking more about journalism, okay? So journalism, you have people who are in service of necropolitics. So journalism is an important part of establishing how killing is not really important. The killing, the value of life is less. So we've reached this point that we started with the exclusion of Palestinians living in Gaza Strip, and from that we're going now to extinction or displacement. So the problem with this is that Israel has been doing this for quite a while now. Now in Europe, in the West, we seem to be doing that quite as well. Let's not forget that the Iraq War cost the lives of 1 million Iraqis. 1 million, okay? This is a straightforward basis for the description of genocide. 1 million Iraqis died. It's a huge number. The value of Iraqi life is less. The value of refugee life, as we've seen, is less. Now the value of Palestinians is less. So there is a huge problem right now that it seems like the economic and political elite is moving in a process of doing away with the problem in terms of killing. And that poses a huge problem. It's not about exclusion, it's not about poverty, it's not about inequality anymore, it's about life or death. So yes, the West has become extremely radicalized. And that is a huge problem. Now, looking at the film, and I think I will end with that because we need to discuss far more than you need to hear me or anyone, is that there is a tragedy, there is this tragedy of dehumanization. That's what the film kind of approached here, that essentially what we saw, this everyday life of this person who wants to fall in love is an act of resistance. Yeah? Because in this dehumanization that is applied by Israel, there's a response, and that response is the search for love, and that was, I think, the meaning behind the film. But that dehumanization also, and I'm not saying it because it's, I'm not trying to equate the consequences on the Palestinians and on the Israelis, no way. But, and I will finish with that, there's a huge problem, and we have to address the elephant in the room. The elite, the power elite in Israel is seen to be in a road where the peace for them, their inner peace, would only come when they themselves perpetrate the crimes that defined Israeli national identity. And that is a tragedy, in the sense that every nation, in order to be built, needs a myth. Okay, nations are pointless; they don't exist in actual case. Okay, so you need a myth, and the myth of that the Israeli state had, was one wise people 2,000 years ago. Doesn't work really well. It's not a really good narrative. So you need something else, another myth, and that myth was a myth that the main narrative was the Holocaust. So on and on, to generate this national identity, you have a continuation about, continuing reminder of the atrocities that were perpetrated against Jews in 1930s, 40s, and of course years and years before. And it seems like right now, from a psychoanalytical side, peace for a lot of people in Israel will only come when they themselves become the victims. So they will utilize Goebbels' approaches and kind of mass media. They will wear that Nazi suit, and that is a complete and utter tragedy. I'm not trying to equate what's happening, the thousands of dead and the loss of the psyche, but it is a tragedy nonetheless. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Why do you think Israelis want to do this absolutely, this genocide? Why? What is the purpose? What do they have? What is their vision? What they see 100 meters away, or let's say 10 years from now, or 20 years from now? Your opinion?
I mean, the Israelis are a complex group with not a homogenic plans, and there is not a single plan. Of course, we're talking now about the elite that is ruling the party, and especially the one linked to the settles in the West Bank, to the military, and to the ruling elite. But I wouldn't say that all Israeli has the same plan, of course. But this specific elite, I think, is very clear. That what they want to do is a single country with a single people from the river to the sea, and that means that the Palestinians and also the Druze and also the Palestinian Arabs, I mean the Israeli Arabs, and all the rest, they have to live, or they have to be deleted. That's the plan, and I think it's very clear. In the case of Gaza, they have seen the opportunity to clean the whole area. Already, they have displaced more than 1.5 million people. They are they are trying to force Egypt to open the border, not to enter humanitarian aid, but to exit the population. And that's very clear. This week, the Israeli government was also dealing with some European governments in order to ask them to accept refugees from Gaza. In order to, the thing is that they will sell it as a humanitarian measure in order to have the opportunity to live from there, but what it means is to live from their lands and not to come back never again.
Yes, but why do they take this, you think, why do you think they take this risk about their room or as a nation to do all this mess? I mean, this will have consequences. But why? My question is, why do you think they take this big risk?
I think they do it because they can do it.
Yeah.
Because they have seen the opportunity and because the so-called international community is allowing them to do it. This was the plan of Netanyahu since forever. Like when he was the ambassador, when that was referring Edward Said, he was already opposing to the Oslo agreements, he was already opposing to the two-nation-state solution, he was already trying to make impossible the existence of a Palestinian state in Palestine, and that was always their plan. Why they are doing it now?
Yeah,
because
I mean,
they have the opportunity.
do you have in mind an economical plan, an economical reason which will give
you have a messianic view of the world, economics are secondary. It's not when you think you have the mission of God to create something, the economics are not that important.
So psycho, you mean, is the situation? I mean, this is a psycho. This is a psycho situation. This is almost like a...
Just to go back to what we said before, there is, of course, there's an economic side to it. Of course, let's not forget that Israel is the watchdog of the United States in the region. Okay, that is a given. But we need to approach. That's the only kind of literature I'll give you. There is a great book by Eric Fromm, The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, and in that book, because I think we need to go back to our Frankfurt School. There were kind of Jewish German writers that were kind of persecuted outside of Germany, essentially, and went to the United States, and they dealt a lot about this element, about what you're asking, what you're saying, cycle, essentially. Well, that kind of trip to the evil lane, what does that mean? And it seems like right now, and you can see it in the discourse they use, the rhetoric, it's genocidal. Like, we will wipe them out of the face of the earth. We will, you know, the whole kind of idea is that finally we can, and that is the scary bit, finally we can do it. That final aspect that brings so much of final solution, that is what I think is just heartbreaking.
That means this will be the story for the next 100 years for them. Like it was Holocaust 1940.
I don't know. Yes.
To approach this era and made like the moral, the ethics, and the freedom of speech customizable, so they can justify it as they want and use it as a freedom of speech, and justify the resistance in some countries and some region of the world, and do not justify it and call it as terrorism or as anti-Semitism in some regions of the other parts of the world.
Yeah, please.
I mean, it was always like that, no? That's the story of colonization. In every colonial situation, there is always people who is enjoying some freedoms and some others that they cannot access to the minimum of the rights that the colonizers have. I think I was personally was a bit skeptical to use the apartheid term when it started to be something common to refer Israel like 10 years ago, for example. But then I realized that it was not misleading what apartheid was in South Africa, but on the contrary, it was describing a very clear reality where there is a group of people that are living in democracy and others just a few meters far away from there that are living in a colonial, purely colonial situation. I think it's a very good description. So I think it's not contradictory, the fact that some of them they have freedom of speech and liberties and rights, because that's the definition of the situation of that they are trying to create not only in Gaza but also in West Bank and also inside Israel for the population that is not purely Jewish.
Just quickly, and yes, sorry. One aspect is you said to customize. That customization is part of the entire kind of Western values idea. I mean, it was never there in the first place. The ideas of kind of democracy or kind of rationality or any other thing. These are if we count the years that they've been the main principle in European history, we'll find that it's less than a couple of decades to begin with. But always we have to understand that Europe's I'm really sorry, I'm getting really horrible now. Dark Continent by Mark Mazauer. Okay, you should definitely read this book. This is amazing. And the question it asks is the following: a lot of people, he says, okay, are saying, "Oh my God, how did Europe descend to fascism?" You know, and all these things in the 40s. And he says, actually, you look closely at the history of Europe. The question to ask is, what else could Europe create apart from fascism? Okay, so this is the canon. What we're seeing right now, okay, is the naked truth of the West, the naked truth of European values. We saw it before. We see it every single day in this island. We see it in the camps that we're creating for our people. We see it in the way we treat our dead in the sea. So every single day it's there. And we tend to somehow think, everyone, including myself, we tend to think that somehow there is a rich crux of this beautiful ideal. Well, sorry.
Thank you.
There is a very contradictory narrative that works in two different levels. In one hand, they say the population of Gaza is hostage of Hamas, and they are suffering the rule of Hamas. So they use the word, they are even liberating them from Hamas. And at the same time, they say there are no innocents in Gaza because they choose to be with Hamas, and they have chosen to be part of this terror organization. So there are no collateral casualties in Gaza because all of them, even the newborn babies, are responsible of this situation. And some of them, they explicitly say this. If you put the Israeli TV these days, that even the newborn babies were responsible of 7 October Hamas massacre. So they are not innocents. And at the same time, if you confront them, they say, yes, of course, I know this is not exactly true. So they are also victims of Hamas, so we need to liberate them. This makes no sense at all. It's not a rational argument. It's not something that can be defended more than 30 seconds. But apparently it works. That's what they say. Sometimes it's also frustrating how simple is the narrative you are combating. you are trying to confront, because there is no more than this, but they are using it all the time.
What do you say to someone that tells you that Israel had a right to defend itself after social?
Do you condemn Hamas? No. I would say that first of all, in a situation of colonization and occupation, the occupier has no right to defend in front of the colonized people. Second is that the right to defend yourself can be never justifying a way of justifying the terrible things that are taking place in, like bombing innocent, bombing civilians, bombing hospitals, can never be defined as a defense of nothing. But and third of all, is not useful. I mean, this strategy that they are using, they call the Dahi strategy. The Dahi strategy, it refers to southern Beirut, to the Dahi, I'm not pronouncing it properly, sure, but the southern suburb of Beirut that was very, very heavily bombed in 2006 under the argument that it was about time to finish with the Hezbollah threat. What happened is that they, in less than 1 month, they bombed more than 1,300 blocks of houses. Imagine how many people. And they provoked huge suffering in thousands of families. But the fact is that Hezbollah, after these bombings, was stronger than ever, because in one hand they were very more popular than ever, because they paid for all the new houses of the people. So all the people was, of course, even the ones that they were not very loyal to Hezbollah before, after Hezbollah coming and paying you a new house in this situation, of course you will be at least not critic with him. And second is that Hezbollah rebuilding all this neighborhood had the opportunity to also build new tunnels under. So also, from the point of view of the military power of Hezbollah, they were stronger than ever after the operation of Israel. So, in one hand, it's not true. In other, it's not legal. But third, it's not useful. It is not true that they will defeat Hamas bombing people. But the truth is that what they can do is to ethnic clean Gaza and to deport the population. This is true.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to ask we all people are trying to fight for the rights. We understand the source of the problem. If yes, we understand the source of the problem of Israel and Hamas, why sometimes we are behind of our government?
And that is a tragedy, in the sense that every nation, in order to be built, needs a myth. Okay, nations are pointless; they don't exist in actual case. Okay, so you need a myth, and the myth of that the Israeli state had was one wise people 2,000 years ago. Doesn't work really well. It's not a really good narrative. So you need something else, another myth, and that myth was a myth, but the main narrative was the Holocaust. So on and on, to generate this national identity, you have a continuation about, continuing reminder of the atrocities that were perpetrated against Jews in 1930s, 40s, and of course years and years before. And it seems like this war hasn't changed many things. When there was this great film that some of us watched, Oppenheimer. So when the nuclear bomb fell on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, it melted down everything. When the English bombarded Dresden, they melted the whole thing down to nothing, including hospitals, including children, including everyone. I think there was one army barracks in the whole of Dresden. So So on the one hand, it hasn't changed. What it has done, it has, I think, what it has done has created something very strange. I wanted to say that before. It seems that when this war started, everyone more or less knew where they were standing on. Okay, on which side they were standing. Because by now, that happens in history when societies are very divided. When they're very divided, there's no one sitting on the fence. There's no one saying, oh, there is this and there is that. No, that's bullshit, okay? People know where they stand. So when this war started, people knew where they were standing, okay? They knew they were going to support Israel no matter what. No matter how many babies, no matter how many hospitals, they wouldn't care at all. They would still use it, okay? So the problem with the Israelis, the problem with the government, the European government, is that they're generating in this way, and mass media in these countries, okay, is that they're generating culprits, people who are guilty without actually having done anything. Because if you support Israel's right to defend itself, okay, then you are guilty. You will feel guilty when the hospital comes down. And the problem is you haven't pulled the trigger. And that is a horrible crime, to turn someone into a culprit, into someone who is actually in some way, he's somehow guilty of a crime he didn't commit or she didn't commit, just by accepting that. And in that way, I think that European countries, the West in general, has been dreadful in the way they're approaching that. And I think that's the answers I can give for that. I finished, yes.
I just wanted to follow up the question that I was asking earlier. Hamas is just 37 years old, and early 2000s they were funded by Israel. How come they become terrorists today? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, those that in Afghanistan were freedom fighters, then they became terrorists. There is also a long record of the Western governments funding their future enemies. But in the case of Hamas, I think there is also a very strong propaganda about what is Hamas. I mean, it is impossible even in the public sphere of Europe to talk about Hamas without, as a political form, and to debate with the proposals of Hamas without being labeled as terrorist. No? Hamas, for example, probably all of us, we have heard thousands of times that Hamas would never accept the existence of Israel and want to erase Israel and wants to just kill all Israelis. Hamas in 2006 delivered an agreement, a proposal to Israel in order to have what they called the 100 years agreement, in order to have a peace agreement that you will never heard about this in the mainstream media of Europe. You will never heard about Hamas, explaining Hamas not as a bunch of fanatic terrorists, but as a political faction of Palestine. Hamas, even if, of course, they are an Islamist and a religious group, but Hamas is mainly a nationalist group from Palestine. If you say this in most of the mainstream media of Europe, you would be totally labeled as a terrorist friend or pro-terrorist, and even in this context that it seems familiar, I feel now that if I was defending Hamas or something like that, so do I
condemn Hamas?
That was the next question. Do you condemn Hamas?
I'm not a judge. I'm not condemning anyone.
I had the last question.
Can I add something?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm really sorry. There is one important thing. If we go a bit more in the strategy in the Middle East, that the Americans and the kind of Israeli has been a very strong kind of ally to that. Their main goal was to eradicate nationalist kind of political groups in kind of the region that were speaking from a non-religious kind of background. The main idea, because Hamas, of course, was supported by Israel as a way to undermine Fatah, on the one hand, okay, but also as a way, okay, and the same thing happened with the Muslim Brotherhood, and so the main thing is to have these kind of religious groups, which, in the view of the United States and Israel, okay, they are more easily controllable. So there was a huge kind of effort, and there still is this effort to undermine the non-religious aspect and tie the region somehow also to the European psyche, tie the region together in people's mind with religiosity. There is no such thing as a non kind of Islamist person in the region. It's impossible. It doesn't exist. It's everyone is there, you know, doing exactly what is supposed to do in a religious kind of mentality. So that's quite an important thing.
But I insist, not only Hamas, even the Islamic Jihad, they are mainly nationalistic movements. They are also always labeled as extremist religious movements, because if you label this, there is no negotiation process, there is no dealing with ISIS, no, as they call them now. There is no dealing with Al Qaeda, of course, but they are not the same. Even the Islamic Jihad is a mainly nationalist group with a very strong ties with the Christian community, for example. That they have a lot of alliances with Christian rooted groups, and even with the different factions, they have been going through many different situations, but they have been allies. They have been also allies to the Popular Front or to other non-religious factions very often. Also, other times they have shot each other, but this is.
So yeah, my question was basically, who do you think is next? Because everybody is just sitting down and like, okay, we're all listening to the show and everything, and I think we all think that it stops there. But just as an Egyptian citizen, I hear this a lot. Open the gates and let Palestinian people come in and everything, and okay, but then isn't Israel gonna say tomorrow, hey, you guys are Hamas, and Egypt is gonna be Hamas, and like, who is next? That's the question that I have. And why do they need to evacuate from the beginning? Or what's the...
I mean, if the question is specific, I would say the next one is Lebanon. But if the question is like more philosophical, I would say that the importance of this conflict is that it will also affect, like not only of course Palestine, not only even Middle East. It's already affecting the international relationships everywhere. So the next one is everyone in that sense.
Last There was a hand over there.
It was just a comment about the jihadists and the Islamic Jihad. Wasn't first founded. Sorry. It's just a comment about the previous question about the Islamic Jihad. It wasn't in the first place founded and supported by the USA in order to find the Russian in Afghanistan, and then how it goes and came like this. It's only a comment, so.
No questions? Yeah.
Yeah. As Israel has been evacuating people from Gaza, what is the plan of Israel? They want to go to stay in Gaza or to build more Gaza or all Palestinian people to leave? What is the plan? Because they evacuate everybody. After bombing, what will happen?
I think I will say the same question. A cousin of mine was in Gaza Strip about 10 years ago, and he tried to set up, along with Doctors of the World or something, not MSF, the other one, tried to set up a clinic. And when I asked him this question, exactly the same question, okay, his idea is that they really, your average Israeli just tries to say the problem will somehow, disappear. Now this is the scary bit, because this somehow disappear can mean everything.
I would like, as you
were talking about what's next, I asked this question exactly to Mo. When I recorded the voice, I asked him how he sees Palestine and Gaza, because we have two realities in Palestine, in occupied Palestine. We have the West Bank and we have Gaza. So I asked him this question, and we will pass, Dimitri, if you can pass the audio, please.
والله يعني بعد الأحداث اللي بتصير يعني على خير وسلامة إن نضل حد عايش من أهل غزة. بالنسبة لنا وجهة نظري ما في واحد في غزة حيكون معه فلوس ويقعد في غزة، كله حيهرب، كله حيحاول يشوف له دولة تانية يطلع عليها، لأنه صراحة اللي بمروا فيه أو اللي مروا فيه أو اللي قاعدين بمروا فيه ما كان حد متوقع إنه راح يصير. فالوضع زي ما حكيت لك صعب جدا جدا جدا. فما بعرف صراحة، أنا من وجهة نظري ما راح حد يضل قاعد في غزة.
If someone stays alive and has money, will not stay in Gaza. Everybody will escape. Everybody will try to find another country to live, because what they experienced or they are experiencing wasn't expected. And as I said, the situation was already very and extremely difficult. And now, frankly, I don't know. From my point of view, no one will stay in Gaza.
وفلسطين كيف بتشوف فلسطين كمسار؟
And Palestine, how you see Palestine? I'm asked because the first one was Gaza and okay.
بشكل عام مقسومة قسمين، اللي هو قسم قطاع غزة اللي بتصير فيه الأحداث، والقسم الثاني اللي هو الضفة الغربية. طبعا الضفة الغربية الأمور فيها كويسة، صح في انتفاضة وفي احتلال وفي هذا، لكن الوضع الاقتصادي ممتاز جدا.
بس هلا عم بضايقوا كثير على الفلسطينيين.
هو بداية، لكن برضو الوضع كويس، ما بتقارن في غزة أكيد. أو وضع غزة 0-0-0. فما بعرف، ربنا يفرجها عليهم بس.
So for this question, what Palestine? The situation in the West Bank is okay. Indeed, there is the occupation, there is uprising, etc. But the economic situation is good. We can't compare it to Gaza. The situation in Gaza is zero. I don't know. May God relieve them. So thanks for Hibai, thanks for Mo. He wasn't able to be with us. It wasn't planned to have Mo. It was planned to have a girl with us to talk about Gaza. She was a nurse in Gaza, but she got her papers and she left before 2 days. So, and Mo, he didn't know when. Mo is not his name. It's a small abbreviation. He preferred to not mention his name. So I would like a huge thanks to Hibai, to Mo, to Nikos, to Sia, to Starfish, to Dimitri, to Rudy. He will play Rada music. They will do a small concert. Thanks a lot for the artists that they are with Rudy. Thanks to Omar for translation. Thanks.